Hello, brothers and sisters. I have started and deleted this video at least 5 times, and hopefully, this is the one that we're going to keep. Unfortunately, Steven Spielberg isn't here to help me get everything just right, so it's kind of all on me, but I'm working at it. Probably the biggest trouble that I'm having is I want to speak to you as your pastor, and it's hard to talk about the issues of what's going on and not let the American citizen political side of Mike come out when what I'm really trying to do is talk to you as pastor who has a different set of responsibilities than what the typical American citizen has. So, anyways, my goal here is not to stir up political thunder, but instead it is to talk to you about where we are as a church, where things are, what the vestry has been doing and looking at, and hopefully give an idea of you know what we're thinking about getting back together. I know that it's been difficult for many of you. It's been difficult for probably all of you. Even when we maybe are homebodies, all of a sudden when we can't go anywhere, it feels very much like we need to be places, and little things like wanting to get out to see your grandkids, or wanting to go for a bike ride, or wanting to be able to get together for a meal with your friends from church seem like luxuries of a bygone age, not to mention wanting to come together and worship. And as I've stated before, it's nice that we have the technology to be together to worship virtually, but it really points to how important it is that we worship in person together, because worshiping over the internet is a far cry from the real thing in person. The good news that we should always bear in mind is that worship is not dependent upon us. It is dependent upon God Himself and the work of the Spirit. We worship with a great cloud of witnesses. And so, in a day where I am not feeling up to it, or I feel like it's off and I didn't worship as well as I could, there's a great cloud of witnesses, past and present, all gathered together in worship, and God receives the worship, even if I didn't nail it, even if I didn't do it perfectly, as a person sitting in a church. And the liturgy is the work of the people, but ultimately everything that we do by the power of God. And so He enables us to worship Him. He desires us to worship Him, and then He enables us to worship Him. So even though it may not always feel the same to us and for us, the honor and glory that we ascribe to God is in no way diminished because we aren't able to gather together. And God knows what's going on. God is in control. God is not taken by surprise by any of us, and our willingness to come together, even in virtual worship that is less than satisfactory to us. It still is pleasing to God that His people come together to honor Him and glorify Him. So let that be a comfort to you, and hopefully it will be an encouragement for us to continue to do so. And remember that worship is really about being conformed to the mind of Christ, in the image and likeness of Christ. Let us be transformed by the renewing of our minds. As Paul says, this is our spiritual worship. So we don't want to follow the patterns of this world, but we want to follow Christ and be renewed by Him and transformed by Him. And there's nothing keeping us from reading our Bibles, from praying, from listening to Christian podcasts, or reading great books that can encourage us, or whatever. There are so many ways in this current situation that we can continue our transforming our minds and being conformed to the image of Christ while not being able to go about our daily lives. And so I hope that you will find some ways, some great resources. You can read anything by James Packer, John Stott, R.C. Sproul. There are a lot of great people. C.S. Lewis, G.K. Chesterton. There's a lot of great stuff out there that can be read. Kevin DeYoung, Greg Gilbert. I could go through and a whole video just talking about that. You could read Michael Horton. You can also listen to the White Horse Inn, Michael Horton's podcast, where he covers a lot of good theological stuff and is great. There are a lot of great Christian podcasts. John Piper, read any of his books. And then there's, I forget, Ask Pastor John maybe is the name of it, but if you search John Piper under any podcast app, you should come up with some things from John Piper. So there are some great ways to still learn, still grow, still be engaged, even if it is not your normal way. Obviously, reading your Bible, joining us for Bible study, holding a virtual Bible study with some friends and family, maybe gathering as things open up in small groups in houses where, if we're approved to meet in smaller groups, but still not huge groups, get some friends, some people from church, some people and sit down and talk about the Bible or read through a book and discuss it. So there are ways that we can continue to be engaged and continue to be sanctified and transformed in the renewing of our mind. And that is all worship. That is all ways that we honor and glorify God in our lives. And so Sunday service is vital, but it is only one part of a bigger picture of how we honor and glorify God in our lives. And so, there are these other ways, and now's the time to explore them. But let me say where things are with meeting in person. We had our monthly vestry meeting this past week on Tuesday, and the primary thing we discussed was in-person church services. And the goal for us is to meet. We can't wait till there's a cure. One, there's never been a cure for a coronavirus. We can't wait for a vaccine. There's never been a vaccine for a coronavirus. Hopefully, we will have both of those things. But as it stands right now, we can't put our lives on hold indefinitely hoping those things come. However, we do have the reality of a state government who is the one constitutionally with the power to handle these issues. Now, not to tell us that we can or can't worship, but as they seek to open different things up, we can talk about more what is safe, because we don't want to be, as the body of Christ, putting people at risk over and against what everyone else is doing. As I preached a few weeks ago, even Peter and Paul both being killed by the emperor, but they were preaching that we submit to our government authorities. I do think there's a time for civil disobedience, but I don't think that we're at that point yet in terms of gathering in spite of what is said by our state government, because I think that if apostles were willing to submit to the authorities and find themselves executed, then being told that we can't worship, and actually I don't think we've been told that we can't, but being told that we need to limit how we gather together to protect one another, I think that we're not at the point of saying we're going to go against the government's wishes. Though at the same time, I don't think that we can sit here indefinitely and not meet. There will be a time at which whether we're given the green light or not by others, we're going to have to say, we feel like it's time for us to make the decision on our own to gather. All of that said, the vestry discussed what reopening will look like and when. And the consensus that we came to as of now is that we have communication from the diocese where they're asking churches not to meet in person yet, but they are not forbidding that churches meet. There was a point at which we were being told that we weren't allowed to meet, which is the diocese right, the bishop and standing committee's right to do, and it is our responsibility to listen to them. Now we are being encouraged not to meet, but we are not being told that we are not allowed to meet. So that is why we began our own discussion as a diocese, or as a church, as a vestry, on what to do. The standing committee has said that they are working on guidelines for reopening and that they hope to have those to us in the next couple of weeks. So as a vestry, we discussed what opening would look like, when we might be able to do that. And the conclusion we came to was that we believe that the current stay-at-home order is through May 28th, and we're waiting to hear what the governor says. And in that time, which is about 2 weeks, that gives us time to wait the couple weeks that the diocese said that they hoped to have guidelines for meeting in person out to us. And so our plan at this point is to discuss this again at our June meeting, which is June 9th, at the absolute latest. And that doesn't mean we are or not going to open after that, but we're willing to give the time for the next couple of weeks to see what our governor says and what we receive from the diocese. And if we receive that information prior to our next vestry meeting, we will meet prior to that meeting and have discussions and see where things stand based on what we've received. And if we don't have them by the next vestry meeting, then the next vestry meeting again will be dedicated to this discussion and what we think we need to do at that time. Especially, we'll have a better idea of where numbers are. We'll have a better idea of what's happening in states that have reopened and things like that to make a decision. So the earliest we would be meeting would be sometime in June. But I'm not saying we're meeting in June. It's going to come down to the information that we receive and where things look like they're going. The factors that we have to weigh as a vestry and as a church are that we have the civil liberties to gather and to meet, but we have a Christian responsibility also to do what is best for one another, and we don't want to put people at undue risk. I do believe that we can begin to meet safely and mitigate risk, but I also don't want to put it on the conscience of anybody, in particular our vestry, to say, somebody in our church contracted coronavirus and died because we opened up too early. And so we want to review the information. I also would encourage people that even once we do open up, if you have concerns, don't come until you're ready. Once we do open up, do the things that you need to do to protect yourself. What we're seeing is that the vast majority of deaths from coronavirus, people have comorbidities. They have other issues that are significant health problems that relate to their death, heart problems or diabetes or things like that were compounded by the coronavirus. And so people know whether they have those kinds of factors in their own lives, and we want to be smart about that as well. But the goal is to open up and meet as soon as possible, that we feel that we are not putting people at risk as well. Some discussions that we have had would be, and so that our vestry is not just sitting back and waiting during this time. We have begun a document on Google Docs or Microsoft Teams, I don't know which one, but that we are working on a document, collaborating on a document for safety protocols for how to clean things, where will people sit, what are we going to do about people wearing face masks? How is communion going to be handled? And so we are working on how all of those things will play out so that when we do announce that we are going to meet in person, we will be able to announce that and answer the kinds of questions that we think people will have about what protections are in place and how things will be handled. For example, we're going to forego the peace for a while. I think that's obvious. We'll encourage people to wear masks, and we will likely have communion consecrated, pre-consecrated, and set on a table with individual cups and wafers for people to take, so that we limit the contact. And those kinds of things are easy ways that we can protect ourselves. But we're working on what kinds of things we need to do to make sure that when we do open, people are protected and that people feel safe. And that's the big thing is we may want to get together, but we also want to get together and feel like we're not putting anyone at undue risk when we do that, and that we're not putting ourselves at undue risk when we do that. So please know that we're working on it. We ask for your prayers for wisdom and guidance. We're certainly open to your friendly and polite and informative feedback on what your thoughts are and things like that. As far as things beyond that, a lot of things are wait and see. I know there are other churches that are opening, and it's hard to say this church in Charlevoix is opening next week, but we're not. Well, that church in Charlevoix isn't responsible for the people at New Life. So their decision to open, it doesn't impact our decision to open. It's our responsibility for what we do for the people at New Life. But beyond that, we have a diocese. And so we have an amount of responsibility to listen to what's being passed down to us from the diocese as well. And a lot of churches don't have that kind of structure. But know that I have been praying for you all. I appreciate that many of you, if not all of you, have been praying for me, for the church, for one another. I ask that you continue that you continue to pray for one another, continue to pray for our vestry and our bishop and standing committee, continue to pray for me. If people have needs, please reach out. Please let me know. I have some financial resources, certainly happy to have prayer resources and things like that. I apologize because things get lost in the shuffle, and among those things that got lost in the shuffle, and there's really no excuse for it other than when we don't see each other and we don't communicate normally, it is hard to make sure that we're communicating all the things that need to be communicated. But in case you didn't hear, Dick Olson died, I want to say a week and a half to 2 weeks ago now. I apologize if this is the first you're hearing of it. We can't have a funeral. We're not really able to have a funeral. Also, Marianne Olson's brother died a couple days later, a day later or 2 days later. He was 100 years old. In both cases, it's a blessing, and we're thankful because of the suffering that they were facing. And yet I do ask for your continued prayers for Marianne and Patty, Marianne and Dick's daughter, and especially because we can't have a funeral, and that makes the grieving process difficult. But those are the kind of things, if things are happening, please communicate them to me, communicate them to one another, because if they're not communicated, we're not seeing each other, so it's really hard for us to know. I want you to know I am praying for all of you. I enjoy the time that I get to do the worship services that I post for you guys. I enjoy spending that time with Bonnie and with the boys to get things posted. I appreciate those who are helping with the Sunday service. I hope all those things are meaningful to you. I invite you to join us for our Wednesday night Bible study via Zoom. Let me know if you want an invitation to that. And I want to encourage people, if you're able, to keep giving because the church's expenses don't go away. But I also want to encourage you that if you have a financial need, to let me know, because many generous people have reached out and shared money specifically to help people in our congregation who might be struggling during this time. And so, please don't be too proud. If you have a need, let us know. Let me know. It's confidential, and I want to make sure that everybody is taken care of. So that's my update. Hopefully, in the next few weeks, we'll have more of an update. I wish I had more to share. The vestry has talked about some things like gathering for an outdoor service sometime in June or July if we're not able to meet in person in the building, trying some different things, but we are discussing those things. We're kicking them around, but the goal right now is ultimately to see first if meeting in person in our church is going to happen in the next month or so, and where that stands. So we will communicate more to you when we have it. And I want to thank everybody, and I pray God's blessing upon you all, and I hope that I get to see you all very soon. God bless. Good night.